Hi, and welcome to ADHD Awareness Month, week 3. So we are literally nearly slap bang in the middle of ADHD Awareness Month. I'm Stephanie Camilleri. I'm founder of Ascend ADHD and Empower ADHD, and I'm here with
Timothy Morgan-Evans.
He's our head of engagement and partnerships at Ascend ADHD. So last week we were looking at ADHD in education, the academics, and we're at the TES SEN show on Friday and Saturday, actually, and had the pleasure to meet hopefully a lot of you that are listening today, teachers and trusts. And we're really looking forward to getting into the conversation and talking about how we can support you through Empower ADHD. But this week is all about Ascend ADHD, the workplace. So today we're going to be discussing the new standard for ADHD support. And then tomorrow we're going to be talking about entrepreneurship in ADHD, and then we're talking about boundaries building businesses. However, we're starting this week with probably the most important topic, okay? Because there has been a shift. We have seen a shift, and as a result, we have shifted from the ADHD Advocate to Ascend ADHD.
Well, that's absolutely true. And could you give us, possibly, Stephanie, why that shift happened? What was the story from shifting from the ADHD Advocate to Ascend ADHD?
Yeah, I mean, a lot has happened. There's so much awareness has grown over the last couple of years. When I created the ADHD Advocate back in 2018, there was really small amount of ADHD awareness. And definitely since COVID, obviously there's been a lot more awareness, diagnoses. Unfortunately, not enough diagnoses because of all the waiting lists. But there is more awareness. Now, what's happening though, as awareness is growing of ADHD, I mean, still not the level it needs to be, but the support hasn't been able to keep up, in terms of the ability to look through the ADHD lens and to understand what type of adjustments, in culture and in environments and actual day-to-day support, it hasn't gotten there. So what we're finding is there've been a lot more people like coming to us, for instance, as well, and through the Advocate previously in performance management. A lot of ADHD employees being put into performance management because their ADHD hasn't been understood. And it's definitely, from what we can see, getting a bit a crisis point. But there've been some tribunal decisions that really are setting the new standard for ADHD support, which we'll have a chat about.
So just going back a little bit, so when with the ADHD Advocate, there was a lot of calls you had maybe to do with advocacy,
yes,
or to do with that controversial, the combative approach. What happened there?
Yeah, what we were seeing, and we were involved in a few of them in my capacity as an advocate. I'd sometimes come in with the employee and in performance management, and they were very good. They're pretty messy, and unfortunately, the whole process, no one wins. Absolutely no one wins. So you've got an employee that gets destroyed, and then the managers, the HR, they're also pretty much at breaking point as well. Because they don't know, they don't understand, they don't know what to do. They're at risk as well. They're scared. They don't know what to say. And there were no good outcomes. There were no good outcomes that came from this adversarial approach.
So what will be the difference with Ascend? What's the aim of Ascend?
Good question. So yes, what we did realize though, because someone had asked me, what kind of outcomes do you achieve through coaching versus your ADHD awareness training? And so, because previously we used to just kind of drop in and do a one-off awareness training session to a corporate. And I was kind of stumped because I was able to give like hundreds and hundreds of, really tangible, amazing coaching outcomes. When we coach employees or managers or leaders of organizations, can really give tangible heaps of evidence in relation to what they can achieve. But with the training, I didn't have the evidence, and that really worried me. And that got me thinking, well, hang on. Well, are we taking the right approach? And this kind of bolted on approach compared to like an embedded coaching style approach, we know works. So that's why we created Ascend ADHD, because I really wanted to take the coaching approach that works and, apply it to the entire organization.
That's fair enough. So for organizations who are willing to invest in this kind of support, what would you say would be the main outcomes for them?
Gosh, well, I mean, so much. It's a very different, I mean, the awareness training itself obviously is a starter, and that is kind of the starter part of, what we provide as a starter through Ascend. However, it's not enough. We need to have those check-ins afterwards as well to make sure that staff have truly understood, the ADHD challenges, kind of what that looks like in the workplace. But then more importantly, in terms of shifting approaches, trying on strategies, we want to be able to check in with them to see, is that working, and give them opportunities to be able to maybe sometimes, usually it can just be like a tweak, even for instance, that can make all the difference. Because with rejection sensitive dysphoria, particularly in communication, if you don't understand how to navigate communication with RSD, then, that can basically be enough to send your employee into a rumination and a deterioration in mental health and a spiral, which can sometimes lead to them exiting, going on sick leave too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is the thing. It doesn't necessarily have to be that massive effort for employers. Sometimes it's just a little shift.
Yeah.
A change in communication, the ability to understand. And once that happens, there can be a massive shift in productivity. It's a better result for everyone.
Yeah. This is the thing what employers don't understand, because we have, when we have employees that we coach that are in performance management, I can tell you, every single employee, right? A lot of people would think, hopefully not, but they must be the employees that, really trying that hard. But these are the most dedicated, hardworking, talented employees of the organization. Honestly, they're there, working all hours. They're there working their entire weekend to make sure they don't drop the ball, that they meet that deadline. They go over and above. I've had doctors that, with their patients, they'll use their spare time to like make a patient. I had one sourcing some magazines and doing all these other things, just, so she could provide a better experience, for a patient that unfortunately meant she was behind, with other kind of work, admin work usually, unfortunately. And that's what kind of tips, the employees into performance management. It's not because they're not doing what they were originally, retained to do really, really well, because they're absolutely running rings, around their neurotypical peers in a lot of cases. It's the other stuff, like, oh, have you done your timesheets? Can you write up that report? I know you've told me such and such, but I need that written up. And, it's all those things that ADHD struggle with that get in their way. And unfortunately, that will often lead, to these really, top performers exiting. And it doesn't make sense.
And then the employers lose out. I mean, there's a lot in there as well, because the employers lose out on that great employee. That risks the tribunal.
Yep.
And that employee then won't be able to achieve their potential. They will see suffers a great loss. I mean, it's a myth that these tribunals, ADHD, want to have them. Nobody wants to have them.
I can't tell you how many don't go to tribunal. Even then, particularly in light of those new tribunal decisions from May, like Capgemini, Stedman, employees have quite a leg to stand on now in terms of, when support's not being provided based on these recent decisions. But even with this extra, backing behind them, they're destroyed. Like they are destroyed. They're so worn out, so disparate. They come broken, honestly. They come to us broken, which is really sad. Both obviously, mostly, for the employee, but again, it just baffles me, because for their employer, it's a massive loss, because these really are or were their highest performing employees. I had one in particular who she was getting all like 5s out of 5s in her previous performance reviews. And then she was promoted, and this is what we see a lot too. She was promoted because she was doing so well, but because the promotion then meant she had to do a lot of delegation and, juggling different projects and making sure she communicated and kept everyone up to date, and a lot of admin, her ADHD obviously got in the way. And unfortunately, instead of her employer being able to provide to understand that was going to be a problem for that transition from an ADHD perspective, there was not that support and scaffolding, there. if that was there, then, you know, they would have retained and a really impressive, dedicated employee. So.
And this goes back to why is that ongoing support is essential, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because the awareness training does provide that foundation. You get that aid to communication, you get to learn a language, but you don't have that ongoing support. You won't be able to know how to get the strengths out of your ADHD, which is vital.
Yeah. And
then the company's losing out as well because they won't know how to actually support their employees properly.
Yeah, exactly. It's you've got to take you know, it's an ecosystem.
Yeah.
You know, it's the same as when we're coaching students in the context of families, right? Quite often the parents can, you know, make the difference to, you know, we can coach, you know, a child, for instance, a student, and really kind of shift their mindset, help them accept and, you know, their ADHD needs, communicate, you know, for what they need. But if you have got a parent that doesn't get it, right, or they are struggling themselves, they can't hold the space. They can't put into place what's needed for that child to thrive so that the whole family, you know, everyone, the school, everyone, you know, thrives. Yeah. And in exactly the same way, it works the same way in the workplace, like with the managers in particular. I always make that analogy between the managers and employees and the parents and the children without obviously, you know, saying that, yeah, that's what we're talking about in terms of obviously employees are not children, but it's that same, you know, kind of, you know, supervisory guiding style of relationship. And more importantly, it's the main body double relationship. And because the body double strategy is the key strategy for ADHDers, right? It is a key relationship, and that needs to be supported.
So yeah, it's vital for those managers to have that training, because otherwise, I suppose RSD is a massive thing, is that in there?
That's rejection. Yeah. So that's
rejection. Yeah, exactly.
Rejection sensitive dysphoria. Yeah. And we've talked about this a lot over the years. And I think it was Dr. Dodson that came up with rejection sensitive dysphoria in the US. And it's a severe rejection, like intense feeling of rejection, actual or perceived. So it feels like crippling pain. And ADHDers will tend to avoid things that they'll fail at, that they think they fail at. They are perfectionists because they think, you know, if I do this perfectly, I'll be above reproach and no one will criticize me, right? So everything done perfectly, which you can see, right? Hopefully you can see the picture, what's happening in the workplace, right? You've got people avoiding things, but, you know, oh, hang on, I don't want to do this thing, you know, I could get criticized for it. But also all tasks, right, treated in the same way and, you know, basically being worked to at the same impossible perfectionist standard, right? There's no such thing as perfect, but two, there are going to be other things that need to be done, right? So effort should not be applied at the highest level to everything. And then you've got the people pleasing. And the problem with the people pleasing is, though, particularly if you're more junior, and I've seen this at manager level as well, obviously, is that you're going to say yes to everything. And if people are coming to you and you've already got so much work on and you're being asked to do even more work, right? You're not setting boundaries, because a lot of them can't set boundaries, which we help them do in coaching, right? Then that's where we lead to burnout. And that's what we see. That's particularly in the law firms and the financial institutions. And I used to be a magic circle lawyer, and I worked at a bank as well. So I know firsthand what that's like. And also with all the people I coach in law and finance, it's a real problem.
Yeah. The burnout, the overwork. However, managers are trained, and managers have the knowledge and have the ability to get the strength from their ADHD employees and not push them that hard. Would you say then the outcomes again would be better, would be different?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Because quite often, you know, it's particularly if you've got an ADHD manager, and Ascend ADHD also takes into account that level too, you know, in terms of supporting managers with ADHD, particularly if those managers with ADHD are supporting employees with ADHD, right? Again, it's like, and again, I take it back to the analogy of a parent with ADHD trying to parent and bring up and manage children with ADHD. Like, you know, if you don't have support for yourself, then you're not going to be able to be that rock, you know, be what that person that needs you, you know, and looking up to you for support needs you to be. You just can't. So that's, we very much at Ascend ADHD really appreciate that.
Yeah.
And that's why we provide support at all the levels that need that support, because it can fall down in many ways.
That makes a huge amount of sense, because if you just have the initial awareness training, again, you don't have that ongoing support. Things still have a potential to go wrong if you don't have that ongoing support. And then you risk these things like the tribunals, like the unhappiness at work. And I mean, I would say also an ADHDer who's not happy at work and not playing to their strengths might be less productive, not be able to reach their potential. So in any way, without talking about, the fear factor, it's going to end up as a tribunal, whatever.
Yeah.
Think about it more as an investment, more as something to work towards in terms of getting the best from your employees, and which makes sense for any business, surely.
Yeah, this is the thing, D&I, obviously D&I is extremely important, right? We're in the business, obviously, of ADHD, neurodiversity, and ensuring that we've got at least, the equal opportunities. However, independent of D&I, if you're just purely looking at this from what makes sense in business, like just a pure commercial perspective, right? Like just with anyone, the right bums on the right seats, right? Like you want people to be freed up to work, operate in their area of unique brilliance, because that's what's going to bring in, the most revenue. It just makes commercial sense. You don't get, like you said, you don't get someone that can't do kind of computers or work the computer, but who may be a killer salesperson and
100%.
Gets all their energy from networking with people. You don't get them sitting and doing spreadsheets.
100%. Don't put round pegs in square holes. It doesn't make sense. Even though a lot of the modern business environments can be geared towards having to be good at everything. It's like similarly in education, this all-round approach that everyone has to do all these things, granted it may seem like a good idea, often doesn't lead to the right results. People are stuck trying hard to do things they can't do, which leads to a negative perception of themselves, and then just simply doesn't work. So
it's such a waste.
Finding people's strengths is key.
It really is. And again, I know we keep on talking about the education context, but they're mirrors of each other, really. Is it any one, like what's happening in education, right? So many kids aren't going to school. There's a massive mental health crisis. So many children are not going to school. Like, it's a ridiculous number. And then you look at employment, you look at the rate of unemployment, right? Mm-hmm. The amount of tribunals now, the mental health crisis. It's because it's born of the same. It's born of the same thing. Like what you said, it's the one size fits all approach. It doesn't work. I don't know how much more evidence both education and the workplace need to appreciate that. Obviously there are certain limitations, but what we're talking about, it's not a costly approach to be able to just, we're talking about shifts in mindset, really. And then, just making sure that you're investing, which you would do anyway for your, leaders. A lot of corporates, right? They send their leaders out to coaching. They send their managers, their managers for management training. This is part of it. This should be part of it, right?
100%.
Like, it really needs to be.
And I think if you consider the fact that given, statistics vary, 7%, you can read 10% of the population have ADHD. But given the percent that you will definitely have an employee with ADHD, possibly more, then not investing in that training is letting your business down in many ways.
Yeah.
Because you won't have the ability to support that ADHD employee, and they won't have the ability to achieve their best results.
Yeah, it's a loss that can be avoided, right? In terms of, if you don't understand your ADHD, neurodiverse employees, it not only opens you up, particularly because of these tribunal decisions, to quite a bit of legal liability. For instance, some of the decisions were basically they're imposing occupational health assessments to be done if there is an employee with ADHD, and other decisions have talked about that, reasonable adjustments, do do include the awareness training and the kind of one-to-one coaching and the manager, employee coaching together as well. So there's like a heightened, from what I could see, and I'm reading the decisions more closely, and I'm watch out for my article that I'm going to write, which really focuses more closely on the decisions with an ADHD coaching lens, which is interesting. That'll go out on LinkedIn, hopefully in the near future. But there's a massive legal liability, but then also just the amount of time, right, that is just wasted. The employee trying to defend themselves, trying to document more things, trying to make more time for for meetings or check-ins that actually aren't helpful. And then same goes for the HR and managers as well.
Mm-hmm.
All their time, just trying to make sure that they're documenting everything because it probably, may go to tribunal. So time and effort is just going into this hole. It's a hole and it goes nowhere and everyone suffers. So there's that side. But then what's also a massive loss, when you consider what the upside could be if you do get the support in place for your ADHD employees and managers, particularly the managers, the leaders.
Yeah.
Because we also coach leaders. I run a leadership group for some of the leaders that I've coached before. And the leaders and the managers that are being coached, they're able to tap into, some really, really strong leadership qualities that, mean that they're kind of forming stronger partnerships. They're setting better boundaries. So they're preserving their time, not getting burnt out. They're able to delegate a lot better. That has profound returns, coaching at that level too. So you can, when you add it all up, we're talking a massive gain, massive gain if you lean into this type of support.
No, 100%. And as you say, it's not, it doesn't have to be about the stick. It doesn't have to be about the fear of tribunals. It doesn't have to be about the risk. And the problem is the focus, I think, in the past has always been about that.
Yeah, the tick box
approach, and treating ADHD as a potential problem.
Oh, yeah.
And that's why so many ADHDs are so afraid to disclose ADHD at work. So they're afraid that something might happen. And that doesn't necessarily lead anywhere good either. I spoke to a lady who worked for somewhere for a year, still hasn't disclosed her ADHD, even after having left her previous workplace in the connection with her ADHD. So a more open approach where it's not a fear factor, where it's not this conflict waiting to happen, where you have that training and support embedded in the first place.
Yeah, the culture. So it's known. Yeah, when that organization is known for its ADHD, neuro-inclusive culture, you are going to attract these very high-performing ADHDers. And I had a client actually that moved from one employer, hadn't disclosed it because I think, it wasn't very neuro-inclusive, but then was actively, and he's amazing, and he's just landed this massive client for his business, and he's being promoted partner. But he basically, once he got that knowledge in place and that support, he's doing, he's absolutely thriving.
Well, for example, there are employers like MI6, I think, MI5, who specifically look for neurodiverse employees, specifically look for talents and skills which neurodiverse employees might have. So the strengths-based approach does work.
It really does. Yep. Strengths-based coaching approach, leaning into interdependence and very much baking things in. And that focus, and again, like in the education context, connection. The connections, relationships, that person-centered approach, right? Mm-hmm. You can't go wrong if you start with that. And with ADHD neurodiversity, that's taking into account the whole person. It has to be taken into account. Mm-hmm. So, yes, if you are obviously a HR manager, employee looking for support, do get in touch with us.
Absolutely. Get in touch with us at ascendadhd.com. And if you're interested in anything you've heard today or are interested in getting ADHD support, go to that website and you can book a call from there as well. So, and tomorrow, what have we got?
So tomorrow I'll be speaking with one of our coaches, Yvonne Duggan, and we're shifting from the workplace to entrepreneurship. So we'll be talking about how entrepreneurs with ADHD tend to get in their own way when left to their own devices. not great at setting boundaries and protecting their energy, protecting their energy as well from the clients, and preventing themselves from burning out. So we're going to be talking about what small business owners can do to help mitigate against that. So that's 1 p.m. tomorrow, LinkedIn. And for any other recordings that we've done this month,
we've just got one more night as the ADHD Coaching Summit on Business and Entrepreneurs. So that's on the 31st of October. Halloween at 4 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
That will be on the LinkedIn Live, and also all of these will be going up on YouTube as well.
Yeah, and we'll have Candy Richards from the Federation of Small Businesses opening day 2 of the summit. So it'll be really interesting conversation. So do register. We'll put the link to the coaching summit for that day down on the comments on here as well. But thank you so much for joining us on this very, very important conversation, and do join us in helping raise the standard for ADHD support in the workplace. And we will see you tomorrow.
Thank you so much.
Oh, I think, hang on, because I think